ExpressLRS 3.0 is in release candidate. That's right, it's going to be an official release soon, and it has some really exciting new features. If you are a current user of ExpressLRS, you're going to want to watch this video so that you know what you're going to get when you switch. You could switch now. Release candidate's pretty stable, right? And if you're not a user of ExpressLRS, maybe one of these features is going to get you to think about switching. How would you like to never have to plug USB into your flight controller ever again? I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. So the first thing I need to do is flash 3.0 to my module and to my receiver. And in order to do that, you're going to want to also download the latest version of ExpressLRS Configurator. There's a link in the video description to the webpage where you can download ELRS Configurator if you don't already have it. I'm going to enable the Show Pre-Releases button, and that's going to let me flash, in this case, 3.0 RC2 is the latest version that's available. There may be a newer release candidate at the time you're watching this, like RC3 or RC4, or maybe 3.0 is already out and you don't even have to show pre-releases. Following that, I'm going to select the device category and device for my module. I'm going to set my options here, and I'm going to go ahead and flash the module. I've got a full tutorial for how to set up ExpressLRS, how to download all this stuff, and the various ways that you can use to flash your module and your receiver. We're not going to go into that in depth here. There's a link in the video description to that video if you need it. Once we flash the module, we're also going to need to download an updated Lua script and put it on our radio's SD card. The ExpressLRS Lua script has changed between 2.x and 3.x. The 3.x Lua is backwards compatible with any 2.x hardware that you've got, so you don't need to keep the old one around. But I'm going to go ahead and plug USB into the top of my radio, and I'm going to select USB storage. And if I go to this PC, a new removable drive will have appeared. And if I go into that drive, it will contain my SD card contents on my radio. I'm going to go into the scripts folder. I'm going to go into the tools folder. And there I should see, if I've previously installed the Lua script, the ELRS v2. I'm going to go ahead and save ELRS v3. And in fact, let's also go into File Explorer and get rid of the old one since we're not going to need it anymore. Scripts, tools, ELRS v2 can go, ELRS v3 can stay, and that is that. And here, if I hold down the sys key and go to the ExpressLRS Lua script, this should be the v3 Lua script. Looks really familiar, looks similar to the v2. I'm not sure how I would know that I had updated it, but I guess I'll just take my own word for it. And next we're going to do the same thing for the receiver. And at the moment, the receiver is not binding to my module, even though they've been flashed with compatible settings, because one is on 2.x and one is on 3.x. So major dot releases of ExpressLRS are not cross-compatible. Once you update your module to 3.x, you're also going to need to update all of your receivers to 3.x. And this will probably not be a problem. A little bit of a hassle to do all the updating, but okay. Except if you have any receivers that are SPI-based receivers, like most commonly in Tiny Whoops, they'd have a built-in ExpressLRS receiver. If it's an SPI-based receiver, currently there is no build of 3.x for it, and you would have to have like two modules, one on 2.x and one on 3.x, one for your Tiny Whoops and one for your other quads, or just not update at the time until there's a release of Betaflight that contains ExpressLRS 3.x for SPI receivers. This is just one of the downsides of SPI-based receivers, unfortunately. I've got a video where I talk more about that, why that is, and the pros and cons of SPI-based receivers, and I'll put a link to that down in the video description if you want to check it out. So I'm going to go ahead and flash my receiver with 3.x, and I'll see you in just a second. Now that I'm done updating the firmware, I can't wait to try out the most exciting feature of this, at least for me, which is the ability to connect to the flight controller over Wi-Fi. So take a look. There's no hidden USB cable here. This is just sitting on the desk, powered by battery, and notice that the LED on the receiver is fast flashing, indicating it's in Wi-Fi mode. Here in ExpressLRS Configurator, if we select the Wi-Fi update method, then we can see down here a list of ExpressLRS devices found on my local network. In this case, the receiver is actually connected to my home Wi-Fi network. You could also theoretically have it be broadcasting its own Wi-Fi network, and you'd go down to your Wi-Fi list, and you would see ExpressLRS_RX, but we don't see that because it's on my home Wi-Fi network. What I need to see is this IP address here, 192.168.1.174. Whatever that is, that's what you want. We're then going to go into Betaflight Configurator, and we're going to choose Manual Selection, and we're going to put TCP:// You got to type it just like this. Don't put a slash at the end like I did here. That won't work. You got to do it just like this, TCP:// and then that IP address, whatever it is, 10.0.0.1 or some other set of numbers just like that. And then we're going to hit connect. And oh my goodness, here we are in the Betaflight configurator over Wi-Fi. That's so freaking cool. It's so freaking cool. Let's take a look at this web browser interface next, because they've made a bunch of changes here and they're pretty freaking cool. The first thing you're going to see is that they've broken it into several different tabs or sections. And the first one is these runtime options. They're putting more and more of these runtime options into the user configurable interface instead of having to do them at compile time. So for example, we can change the binding phrase for the let's say you've got a receiver and all you want to do is change the binding phrase, for goodness sakes. You don't need to reflash the whole damn thing. Just type whatever your binding phrase is. Just type it in here in the web interface, save and reboot. Boom, now it's bound to whatever your new binding phrase is. That's amazing. It means that in the field, again, you could get onto this web browser with your phone and just real quick transfer the bind from one person to another without ever having to touch the bind button or do any kind of flashing. The next thing I want to look at is some new packet modes for ExpressLRS 3.0. Packet rates up to 1000 Hertz for the lowest possible latency, as well as some other clever things they're doing to give you a more reliable connection with less jitter and less dropped packets. But before we do that, I want to just take a second and remind you that I have a Patreon. Patreon is a website where you can support me for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like you've earned it. The amount you subscribe is totally up to you. I like to think of myself as like a busker in the subway, you know, guy playing music or whatever. And as you walk by, maybe you hear that music and you go, yeah, I don't care. That's how you feel. Hey, no problem. Glad I could be there. But if you look forward to my content, if you value it, if it helps you solve problems, educate you, maybe today's the day that you go, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go join Bardwell's Patreon. If that's you, there's a link in the video description to patreon.com. I'd love to have you. Patrons get access to podcasts of all my live streams, and they get access to my Discord server where there is a ton of helpful and friendly people, just kind of like me. So if today's not the day, hey, keep watching. I'll keep making content, and maybe that day will come. On with the video. Continuing down, we've got some new packet rates and modes that are supported, and this is going to be really exciting, especially if you want the absolute most reliable and jitter-free packets, as well as higher frequency and lower latency. So if we go to the Lua script here and scroll through the packet rates, some of the stuff we've seen before, 50 Hertz, 150 Hertz, 250 Hertz, and 500 Hertz were all in ExpressLRS 2.0. And the thing you need to know about those packet rates is that they use LoRa technology. LoRa is a type of radio technology that offers really, really good range and penetration, and that's part of what makes ExpressLRS as good as it is. The higher Hertz means lower latency, but also shorter range. There are some new ones, though, and if we keep going, we can see F500 and F1000. These are the next that I want to look at, and the F there stands for FLRC modulation. It's a different kind of modulation than LoRa, and what you need to know about it is faster and lower latency, but shorter range. How much shorter range is it? In order to answer that question, I can look at this receive sensitivity number here, -104 dBm, after the packet rate. Now, I've noticed just now that as I scroll that number, it doesn't actually update until I select the packet rate. I'm surprised that it's doing that. I think that should update while I'm scrolling, but be that as it may. The lower that number is, the more range you're going to get. And a rule of thumb is that 6 dB of change in sensitivity is approximately equal to a doubling or halving of range. And that's going to let us compare in a sort of a really meaningful way the relative range of these packet rates. So here, if we look at 50 Hertz, which is the highest sensitivity, -115 dBm, and the most range, we can use that as our baseline. And if we go to 150 Hertz, we end up at negative 112 dBm. That is a 3 dB change, and 3 dB is about 1.4 times the range. So we're going to get, actually, divide by 1.4. 50 hertz is going to give us about 1.4 times as much range, all else being equal, than 150 hertz. If we keep going to 250 hertz, we see our sensitivity is now 108 dBm. 115 for 50 hertz minus 108 for 250 hertz. That is about 7 dB. That's about half the range. And we can keep doing those numbers. Now, if I try and go select F1000, FLRC 1000, we're going to get an error message here. And the error message is baud rate too low. That's a new feature that's been added, and you're going to want to pay attention to it. Because the radio itself is talking to the module slower than the module would have to talk to the receiver, and that would be a bottleneck. So it's not going to let us select that rate. In order to fix that, I'm going to press the model key on my radio, and I'm going to go to model setup and scroll to the external RF section, and there's going to be a baud rate section. By the way, this confused me at first because this used to be the same for every model, and it was in the radio setup menu. It's not there anymore. The idea is that if you've got an ExpressLRS module, you may want to use a high baud rate. If you've got a FreeSky module, it may not support a high baud rate. So they made the baud rate setting model specific instead of radio specific. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use the highest baud rate that you can without getting any errors. Do you see here how it says 250 hertz, 1 error? So we're going to raise that baud rate, and let's just crank it all the way up to the max value of 5.25 mega whatevers, and everything seems okay. 250 hertz, 2 errors. Now what let's do is we're going to go back to our ExpressLRS Lua script, and we're going to see if we can crank that packet rate all the way up to 1000. Notice now that we did not get an error message about our baud rate being too slow, but that doesn't mean that everything's okay, because also notice the Lua script isn't really loading. Let's go back and take a look here in the model setup. We're at 1000 hertz with 3 errors. Yeah. Let's go back to that Lua script though and see if it's working. Oh, seems okay. Seems like it's working. We'll go back to the model page. How many errors do we have? 6 errors. That's, Can I reduce this? 3.75. Let's see. If you're getting errors and it's not working, try reducing the speed. And we will go back to the Lua script. Does ExpressLRS okay? No. This is not fast enough. Now nothing's working. We need a faster baud rate in order to use 1000 hertz, apparently. So we got to go back up to 5.25 meg. Otherwise, we can't run 1000 hertz. So you can see here that for the F1000 packet rate, we're at minus 104 dBm. That is 11 dB difference between the 50 hertz LoRa. And just for perspective, 11 dB, that's close to 12, which is 6 dB twice, which is 1/4 or 1/2 times 1/2 the range, which is about 1/4 the range for the 1000 hertz FLRC versus a 50 hertz LoRa, a quarter the range. Is that good enough for you? Well, it depends. If you're racing, it's probably fine. If you're trying to do freestyle, it might not be the best. And of course, we could choose to do something like 500 hertz, which should get us, still says minus 104 dBm. I don't know why that didn't change. Would think that would change. We should get more range out of 500 hertz. Some of the other modes that are there are even more interesting. They're not just faster, but they use that data rate for more consistent packet delivery. So the F1000 and F500 modes simply give you lower latency, just 500 hertz and 1000 hertz, even lower latency. But there are other things you can do with that increased FLRC data rate. The D modes, D500 and D250, and the D there stands for deja vu. Basically what they're doing is they're sending every packet twice or 4 times. And the intent here is that if you're in a high interference environment like a race, and you very, very much care about every packet getting through so you get the smoothest possible sticks, these modes retransmit the packets, so if one of them gets corrupted, the next one has a better chance of getting through. The D250 mode is running at 1000 hertz, so you're going to get the same range as if you were on 1000 hertz, but it sends every packet 4 times. The D500 mode is running at 1000 hertz, but it sends every packet twice. You get a little bit lower latency, but a little bit less redundancy. Finally, there are the full range modes. You can see here we've got 100 hertz full and 333 hertz full. And these address one of the biggest complaints that some people have with ExpressLRS, and that is that the aux channels don't have full precision. In ExpressLRS, if you set the switch mode to wide, and you should, if you set the switch mode to wide, you get 128 positions for every aux channel, which is more than enough for the kind of things that aux modes usually do, and more than enough for servos in most cases. But if you want full, like 10-bit precision, full range aux channels, then ExpressLRS hasn't been able to do that, at least not easily until now. The 100 hertz full and the 333 hertz full modes give you 10-bit, 8, 12, or 16 channels in 100 hertz and 333 hertz rates. So for those of you who are running fixed wings with servos and you want that full precision, then this is for you. The telemetry ratio has in the past been a pretty frustrating feature of ExpressLRS, and I'm happy to say that they have made it much better in ExpressLRS 3.0. The telemetry ratio controls how often telemetry packets are sent, and the problem is that if those telemetry packets don't get sent often enough, then your radio will say sensor lost, sensor lost, sensor lost, and it's pretty freaking annoying. But the frequency of the telemetry packets depends on the packet rate. So if you have your telemetry ratio set one way and you change your packet rate, for example, because you want a little more range or a little lower latency, then you also have to tweak the telemetry ratio, and it's just frustrating to try to find the right telemetry ratio for your packet rate. You can still set the telemetry ratio manually if you prefer, but they've added 2 new options. If I scroll all the way one direction, it says race, and race mode basically doesn't send telemetry at all when the quad is armed, so that you never interrupt the packet flow for telemetry. You keep the packets going as smoothly as possible. Or you go all the way the other direction and you just choose standard. And standard will change the telemetry ratio dynamically based on the packet rate you select. So as I reduce the packet rate, the telemetry ratio will adjust. As I increase the packet rate, the telemetry ratio will adjust. And it just takes care of that automatically. Just do that. Just do that. Just do standard. It's great. Never have to think about it again. Under transmit power, they've made some changes to dynamic power. Dynamic power is smarter. It now uses signal to noise ratio instead of RSSI, which means it will respond to environmental interference, not just raw signal strength. It also is it steps up faster. So those situations you could theoretically get yourself into where the signal dropped suddenly and the power didn't boost fast enough to compensate, it will now boost faster and be more responsive. And it also now detects when you are too close to your receiver and you're blasting it and reduces the power accordingly. ExpressLRS has added a loan model feature, which lets you temporarily bind one receiver to a different module and then easily transfer it back to the original one. The theory here is that if your buddy has crashed all their quads and they want to fly one of your quads, you could temporarily loan it without having to do any flashing or binding phrase change or anything like that. Or you might have multiple modules and multiple sets of receivers, and maybe they don't all share the same binding phrase. I don't know. If you want to take advantage of this, you need the receiver to be powered up and bound. And then at the very bottom of the Lewis script, you'll see other devices. Here in other devices, we can find the receiver, Happy Model EP2400. And when we go into that receiver, we can choose loan model. We would activate loan model here, and then the receiver would go into binding mode. Your friend would then go into their Lewis script and choose bind, and it would temporarily bind to their module. After that's done, they can go into their Lewis script and choose return model, and it would revert to its original binding. Or if they forget to do that, you can do the thing where you power cycle the receiver 3 times with a 2-second pause after each one. So power on, wait 2 seconds, unplug. Power on, wait 2 seconds, unplug. You repeat that 3 times, and then it reverts it. You could also do it from Wi-Fi, if you can get into the Wi-Fi interface. I think a lot of people who are watching this video are watching it because they want to find out new features of ExpressLRS that might convince them to switch. If you are new to ExpressLRS, I've got a definitive getting started guide that gives you an idea of just what you're getting into. You probably figured out that ExpressLRS is not as simple and straightforward to use as something like Crossfire or Ghost. How difficult is it? And what kind of features do you get as a payback? What is life going to be like living with an ExpressLRS receiver and module? My ExpressLRS definitive getting started guide card is on screen right now. As well, I'm going to put a card on screen for that video about why SPI-based ExpressLRS receivers are problematic in today's world, the good and the bad. You can check out one of those videos. I'll see you there. Happy flying.